Good morning and welcome to the program. I'm your host, George Rideout, and as always, working the soundboard is Lynn. And today we have a special guest from Toronto. His name is Jeff Brown, and he is the author of Soulshaping, Adventures in Self-Creation. Soulshaping is a beautiful story of one man's spiritual journey that reveals the inspiring, yet often humbling, path of growth and self-transformation. Jeff offers us a raw, honest, and humorous glimpse into the exploration of self, while also imploring us to celebrate the opening of the heart and the awakening of the soul, no matter where we are directed, what is revealed, or who shows up. Welcome to the program, Jeff. Are you there?
I'm here. It's great to be here.
Finished reading the book last night. It was a lovely read, I must say.
Oh, wonderful. Did it resonate with you?
Yes, and one of the things that kept coming to me was there are so many similarities. It was nice because it was like having almost someone share in a very similar journey.
Right. What parts did you resonate with in particular?
A lot of your early years with your growing up and just a lot of the different explorations that you went through in walking your journey. I think it's good for people who would feel that they're alone in the world, and by picking up something like this book and reading someone else's journey and resonating with the similarities, that we can stop and think, wait a minute, you know what? We're really not alone. There's other people that have walked this trail too.
Yeah, I think it's really important to know that because most of us in the culture aren't walking it, at least not consciously. And, I think isolation is one of the things that turns us back on the path. If we could walk some part of the way with somebody beside us, I think it would be, we would hold the memory of that even when we get back into isolation. And it was important when I wrote it. I mean, one of the reasons that I wrote it, I think, is that when I started to do the work to try to uncover my innate image or my reason for being here in this lifetime, I felt very isolated. And part of it, I wanted to be isolated to some degree because I do a lot of work internally on my own, but I was way too out there by contrast to the people around me. And I think if I'd had a book, a subjective journey book, because the objective books didn't really resonate very much for me, it would have helped me an awful lot. So as I was writing the book, I had a lot of resistance to it on a lot of levels. A lot of stuff came up, and I wondered if really this was of any use to anyone else. And as it turns out, it does. And I think it really validates that, unity consciousness exists, like that we really are all connected, that our journeys are not all dramatically different from each other. And I think that's just a very important thing for us to know if we want to move forward on the path.
Yeah, that's for sure. Before we get right into the book, let's have a bit of background on you yourself. I know that in the book you talk about starting out as a lawyer, but let's begin at the beginning. And so what got you started on your trail, on your journey?
Well, I think even before that, even though I was living in a very combative environment, I always had what I call the little voice that knows. There was always some voice, what I eventually call my inner daemon, which is the presence that comes down into life with us, that holds the truth of our path and keeps trying to nudge us in the direction of it. And so I would have little experiences, like I'd be in university and writing and, just making notes in a class, and suddenly I would write on the sidebar of the paper, "You are not who you appear to be." Or I'd be going out to sell windows because that's was my student business, and I'd kind of pull over in the car before starting, and I would have an interaction with some other part of myself other than the mask or the adaptation that I was operating from to survive in the world. And there were just little glimmers of knowing a lot through my adolescent years, more so in my early 20s when I had to make career path decisions. And eventually, after I articled in criminal law in Toronto, before I was about to sort of sign on the dotted line and start a practice, the voice got much, much stronger inside of me. So there was always this internal tussle between what I call false path and true path. It ultimately always, at the end, I look back and it was always true path, but that was sort of the dichotomy that I was operating from. And, I think there's always voices and signs. It's just a question of whether or not we're going to listen in.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to get into a bit of the differences and some of those signs that distinguish between false and true paths. For yourself, what were some of those first signs for you that there even was a path?
Well, my dissonance, right? My not feeling, not sleeping at night when I'm about to sign an office lease. Just little internal signs, discomfort in my body. Probably at some point in my early 20s when I started to get sick a lot, that might have been a sign that I really wasn't listening in. There was something happening in my body, some indication that my spirit was not satisfied. relationships that didn't serve me were a sign. I mean, why was I continually falling into relationships that were unhealthy and combative and difficult? Because now that I'm walking a path that feels more truly my own, I have no interest in walking, in that direction. Those were some of the signs. There were a lot of academic signs, too. I would read Maslow and feel like, whoa, I really got to do some humanistic psych stuff in my life. And it was a deep pull, like a deep calling. Now, I had the same calling with law, so this is part of what the problem was. There was a lot of conflict around which path was the real path, but those were some of the signs. I went to Turkey after my articling year before I came back to do the bar admission course, and I had a real profound opening experience there.
I got to interrupt because that's another similarity that we share. When I got out of high school, the first thing I did is I jumped on the first jet to Europe, got an apartment in Amsterdam, and then from there we traveled around. But Turkey, Istanbul especially, was the one place out of all of them that I can't even say what it was about it, but it changed me. I don't know what it was, but I came out of Turkey a different person.
Did you have just sort of like you experienced yourself internally in a different way? Is that what it was?
Yeah. Since I was about 12, I've been blessed with, I'll say, mentors and teachers and others to walk the road with. One of those first mentors is the fellow that I went to Europe with. And so I was already 6 years, really, walking consciously a spiritual road. But even more so, I guess, I don't know what it's to really relate it to, except maybe it was a type of a vision quest without even knowing at that time what a real vision quest was.
Right. I think it's really important if people can start, like university crowd, having vision quest experiences without even having to identify it like that, but just recognizing that we've been in a particular way of being based on circumstances, various things we've had to deal with in our lives, and we have only one lens on reality as a result of it, and that sometimes we have to journey to a spacious landscape and break away from that in order to experience ourselves in relation to the world differently. I think it's just I don't know where I would have, in my daily existence and what I knew to be reality, I don't see how I would have possibly had the kind of crack open experiences to another reality that I had by going to places like Turkey. And doing workshops. That's really where it starts to happen.
I think everybody, right after high school, instead of going to college or university, should be, everyone should have a ticket. Okay, where do you want to go?
Yep.
And that should be the first thing that you do in life is just go and see some part of the world to gain a different perspective, because it really can drastically and amazingly change one.
Absolutely. I think it's in Sweden, if I'm not mistaken, where the government actually pays for the young to go away for a certain block of time period. They get actually a paycheck to go off and do volunteer work or some other form of work somewhere else in the world so they can know themselves in a different way. I think this should be mandatory with every government in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when we were in Amsterdam, they had a thing for artists that if you could show a portfolio of some of your work, there was some kind of dispensing of monies that just you could, just kind of survive, but still be able to do your art without having to, do that 9-to-5 gig, and starve.
That's evolved. That's an evolved world, really.
Amsterdam, for me, is my favorite place in the world. It is an island unto itself. It is just an amazing place. And
you experienced yourself differently there? Is that what happened for you?
Yeah, see, that's actually another kind of similarity. I know in your book, and we'll get to that actual place, but there was I can't remember the exact chapter, but you had talked about these things that are more the deja vus. They were like past life knowings. And that happened to me in Amsterdam. I was walking down this street, and to my left was this mural on the side of a building, and it was of a prisoner climbing over the fence of the jail, and even the posts by the sidewalk were painted, black and white. And as I walked past that, I had this amazing, vivid memory of myself in this long trench coat walking by this exact same place at some other point in time.
Right.
It was awesome.
Right. Those are powerful experiences. And, what do you do with those experiences? It's hard to see things in a localized way after you have an experience like that if it feels really solidly true, right?
It's as real as, we're sitting down here talking.
Yeah, absolutely. Waves of resonance, truth chills that tell you that it's just true, right?
Yeah, and then you talk about these two in your book, those peak experiences that grab us and take us and just show us that there is a spiritual component to life. It's a pretty amazing and so needed experience.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Well, it just changes everything, you know. It's like suddenly, I mean, I had that experience in Turkey, and we were in a boat, and we went over this kind of underwater village, and I had this profound sensation that I had been there before. You know, whether I had individually on a soul level been there before, or I was tapping into the collective unconscious, I don't know, but I know that after that experience, it was hard to just identify myself as the lawyer dude, right? Yeah. In this time, it was like, okay, well, I've been all kinds of things in my time, and it's just a broader, it's like painting, you know, broader brushstrokes. You know, the localized picture doesn't even exist anymore, and you're part of a whole swirl, an archetypal swirl, and then you begin to ask yourself some archetypal questions. You know, what archetype am I here to embody? What archetypes have I embodied in the past? I mean, it's really a real cool inquiry, you know. And then you start fishing around and trying to have other experiences so you can go deeper into that experience.
Yeah.
So it's a way to live. I mean, it's, you know, you got to stay grounded at the same time, and I think that's what some people don't do in the spiritual path, and they lose their way.
See, there's another similar thing, and I've talked to Lynn about this often. For, I don't know, a good 13 to 17 years, somewhere in there, I traveled with a lot of different medicine people. One of the things that we saw a lot, because we did sweats at different sweat lodges and different reservations and powwows and gatherings and such. And I saw this so often of people coming out of the sweat. And I always use the term blissed out. And it's a term that you use in your book. It's like, oh, man, all right, someone else who understands that. It's awesome when, again, there's that similarity. And it's like, yeah, someone who's walked a very similar journey.
Right.
Yeah, Lynn's saying explain blissed out, and that's exactly where they have their heads so far in the sky. They're so not grounded that...
Right. Well, sometimes that's really wonderful, though, you know, because like, we really do need to have a sky lens on our localized Earth reality in order to realize there are other paths we can walk. But I think if we go too far out with it, we drift off like one of those helium balloons.
Yeah.
You know, we can never come back to Earth, and then, of course, they get into a relationship and they're crazy, right? Yeah. Because now they're coming back into their stuff again. Yeah, I mean, that's the spiritual bypass. I mean, it's a really, I mean, I did the spiritual bypass, and I think it was good for me. But at some point, it started to become really avoidant path, I think.
Yeah. You have some great quotes throughout your book, and I'm going to read one here from your chapter 2, Calls from the Inner Wild, and it's from Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Oh, yeah, I love that quote.
Yeah. None of us will ever accomplish anything excellent or commanding, except when he listens to this whisper, which is heard by him alone. And that's something that we talk a lot about here, is that you have to be able to first distinguish what your own signs are and then be able to listen to them.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You got to clear enough space in your inner and your outer life so that when this stuff comes in, or when you invite this stuff to come in, because it responds, I think, to the invitation, you can actually listen in and understand what it's trying to tell you, you know. And that's not always a simple thing. You have to play with it and learn the difference between false messaging and, you know, authentic messaging. I mean, we have so much internalized messaging from the world, from childhood, from so many parts and places that, you know, you have to really get to know yourself really well so that when that distant flute comes in, the distant flute of true path, you know that it really is true path, right?
Yeah.
You know, I had a lot of different things come in that seemed to be true, and when I played around with them a little, they were like a leapfrog to the next place, but they really weren't the ultimate path for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is another one here in the same chapter. If we do not pursue our particular call, then the ghost of that call will pursue us like a haunting that stains our days.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Well, then you fall apart. You know, your body falls apart. You get sick. The universe gets busy with you. It says, all right, this dude's not listening to me. This dude's not listening to himself. So now we're going to torment him, and he's not going to sleep, and he's going to, you know, who knows, he may become addicted to various things, and, you know, things are going to start happening. You know, you're going to turn a corner and walk into something that's there to teach you something, and they'll get busy with you. Now, whether you're willing to listen or not depends on your fear level, probably, but, you know, I think it does definitely come back to haunt us if we don't honor the voice when it comes.
That's for sure.
Yeah.